Montana Territory, July 1877, the sky was split wide open with thunder when Maeva Nolan's husband rode off for good, leaving her in the middle of a barren field just outside Red Elk Crossing. Rain soaked through her wedding dress, mud clinging to the hem as if the earth itself wanted to swallow her. She did not chase after him. She stood, chest rising with each breath, one hand resting over the flat curve of her stomach. He had married her knowing about the curse, at least that was what the townsfolk called it. A woman who had lost 3 babies in the womb. A woman whose body, they said, rejected life. Maeva never spoke much about it. The pain was buried deep, where she could not touch it anymore. She had come west to escape the whispers, but they followed her like shadows on her boots. The wind whipped her dark hair across her face. Somewhere behind her, the preacher's wife sobbed and crossed herself. No one stepped forward to help. She left the torn veil behind. Maeva did not go back to the Nolan homestead. That house had never felt like hers. Instead, she walked straight into the forest that bordered the town, shoes ruined, heart numb, and dress clinging to her legs. The trees closed around her like a quiet mercy. She walked until her feet gave out, collapsing beside a creek that ran so clear she could see the stones at the bottom. The world smelled like pine and wet moss. For the first time in days, she let herself cry. A twig snapped. Maeva jerked her head up, heart thudding. Across the stream, half shadowed by the trees, stood a man. He was tall, his dark eyes steady, a bow slung across his back. His black hair was tied behind his neck and his chest was bare beneath a leather vest. He did not move, only watched her with a calm so still it made the world quieter. She sat up straighter. "Do you live out here?" He nodded once. "I hunt." His voice was low, even. She looked down at her mud-covered dress. "I did not mean to trespass." "I know," he said. "You are not lost, you are running." Maeva's throat tightened. "I was a bride, this morning." He stepped closer, crossing the stream without a sound. "He left you?" She looked away, embarrassed by how easily he saw it. "Yes." He crouched beside her, not touching, just sitting close enough she could feel the warmth of him. He smelled of wood smoke and earth. She could not look him in the eye. "I am Maeva Nolan," she said after a moment. "I am Faelan Vance," he replied. They sat in silence until the rain eased. Maeva's hands trembled in her lap, but her breathing slowed. Faelan did not ask questions. He did not tell her to go back. He only stood after a while and said, "There is a place to dry off, if you want." She followed him. Faelan's shelter was tucked between 2 ridges, hidden by thick spruce and stone. It was not a house, not even a cabin, but it was warm and dry. He lit a fire, handed her a blanket, and stepped outside to give her space. She changed into one of his shirts, rolling up the sleeves. It smelled like cedar and salt. When he came back, he brought her a bowl of stew and said nothing while she ate. Maeva had never been shown quiet kindness before. Not like this. Days passed. She did not return to town. No one came looking. Faelan hunted in the mornings and carved in the evenings. He worked with his hands like he had all the time in the world. Maeva helped where she could, mending, washing, gathering herbs. She never asked how long she could stay. He never asked her to leave. One evening, as the sun sank low behind the trees, he sat beside her near the fire and asked, "Why do they call you cursed?" Her fingers stilled on the hem she was stitching. "I had 3 pregnancies. None made it past the 4th month." He watched her quiet. "My husband said it was a punishment," she added. "That I was not made to be a mother, that I tricked him into marrying me." Faelan's jaw tightened. "That is not truth, it feels like it." He shook his head. "The body remembers pain, but it is not the same as being broken." Maeva looked at him. He was not trying to comfort her with pretty words. He simply meant what he said. "Do you have any children?" she asked. "My wife died before the winter came 3 years ago." His voice was low. "The fever took her. We had no children." Maeva's heart ached for him. "I am sorry." He nodded once. That was all. Later that night, when she was lying on the floor beside the fire, wrapped in the blanket he had given her, she heard him moving quietly. She turned and saw him adding more wood to the flames, glancing her way. His eyes held something she did not know how to name yet. But it made her chest warm. The next day, she asked him to teach her how to track. They moved through the forest side by side. Maeva learned the way deer moved, how to tell elk prints from moose, how to feel the air change when something was near. Faelan was patient. He never raised his voice, never made her feel small. When she got something right, he smiled not wide but real. One afternoon, while kneeling by a set of wolf tracks, she turned to him. "Why are you helping me?" Faelan looked at her, long and steady. "Because I see someone worth helping." Maeva's breath caught. That night she could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the shelter, heart racing. She was not used to anyone looking at her like that, like she was not broken. The next morning, she woke to the smell of wild mint and fire-roasted fish. Faelan handed her a tin cup of tea and sat close beside her, their shoulders brushing. "I have something to show you," he said. They hiked west, through the thickest part of the forest, until they came to a clearing she had never seen before. In the center was a small spring-fed pond, blue as glass. Around it bloomed wildflowers in every color. Maeva turned to him, smiling. "This is beautiful. I found it the year my wife passed," he said softly. "I come here when I need to remember that beauty still exists." Maeva looked at him, her heart full. "Thank you for bringing me." Faelan's gaze met hers, steady and sure. "You are not cursed, Maeva." She stepped closer. "How can you be so sure?" He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his fingers rough and warm. "Because I have seen what hope looks like, and it looks like you." Her breath caught. For the first time in years, something fluttered inside her that was not grief. It was not fast or wild, it was soft. Steady, hope. Faelan leaned in slow, giving her time to pull away. She did not. Their lips met like a promise. Maeva felt his hand slide gently to the back of her neck, holding her like she was something precious. She kissed him back, eyes closed, heart open. When they pulled apart, he touched his forehead to hers. "I do not want you to leave," he whispered. "I do not want to go." In that moment, she knew she had found something stronger than pain. She had found someone who saw her, truly saw her, and chose to stay. By late August, the first gold tips of autumn had begun to settle into the cottonwoods, and the nights turned sharper, the kind that pulled close under blankets and made silence feel like company. Maeva had started keeping a small garden near the edge of Faelan's clearing, wild onions, yarrow, and some beans she'd traded for at a camp of Métis trappers a few miles north. She worked the soil slow and steady, finding rhythm in the repetition. Her hands, once soft from town life, had turned calloused and sure. Faelan watched her sometimes, not with curiosity, but a kind of quiet pride that made her spine lengthen when she caught him looking. He did not speak often unless there was purpose in it, but when he did, it always mattered. One morning she found him crouched near the edge of the shelter, sharpening a long blade with a stone. His shirt hung loose, damp from stream water, and his brow furrowed in thought. "You're leaving today," she said, not as a question. He nodded. 3 days. "Elk are moving down from the high ridges. I'll follow them east." She knelt to check the stitching on one of his packs. "Can I come?" "No." He looked up, not unkind. "The ground's harsh where I'm going, steep climbs, little cover. You'd need more rest than the mountain gives." Maeva sat back on her heels. "I can keep up." Faelan set the blade aside. "Your body's still mending. You've done much, but not that." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. She hadn't bled in over 2 months. Her appetite had changed. She'd assumed it was the shift in living, the cleaner air, the steadier days. But now she wasn't so sure. "I might be." She hesitated. "Faelan, I think I could be with child." The air between them grew still. He rose to his full height, gaze searching hers. "You're certain?" "No." "I'm saying I think. I've thought before." Her voice was quiet now. "But this time, it feels different." Faelan crossed the space between them, his hand settling at the small of her back, not possessive, just there. "If it's true, we will carry it together." Maeva swallowed against the tightness in her throat. "Aren't you afraid?" "I've watched you rebuild from nothing, Maeva. You've got more strength in you than any storm I've seen." She leaned into him, turning her face into his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, anchoring her in that wordless way he had. "You'll be back by the full moon?" she asked into his shirt, Before then, if the hunt goes well, she pulled away enough to meet his eyes. I want to build a cradle, not out of hope, just in case. Faelan nodded. Then I'll bring pine from the ridgeline, the kind that doesn't splinter. That night they lay in the shelter's warmth, their legs tangled, the fire whispering low. He traced the hollow beneath her ribs with the back of his hand, slow and reverent. I'll dream of you, he said. Maeva turned her face to his. I'll wait for your footsteps. When he left at dawn, he paused at the tree line, turned back just once and lifted his hand. She stood on the edge of the clearing, wrapped in his old hunting cloak, watching until he vanished into the mist. Days passed in their quiet way. Maeva tended the garden, boiled roots for tinctures, and began shaping the cradle board with a borrowed draw knife left by one of Faelan's uncles. It wasn't beautiful, but it was strong. She lined the inside with softened hide and stitched a small sun onto the headrest. One evening, while boiling water near the fire, she felt a flutter low in her belly, not gas, not nerves. She sat down hard, palms pressed to her abdomen. It came again, softer than a whisper, but real. She wept, not from fear, but from the fragile, impossible joy of it. When Faelan returned, his pack heavy with meat and pine, dusk was just beginning to settle. She met him halfway down the trail, barefoot and breathless. I felt it, she said, her hands gripping his sleeves. It moved. He dropped the pack and pulled her tight against him, his face tucked into the curve of her neck. She felt him breathe her in like he'd been holding it the whole journey home. I brought the wood, he said, voice rough, but we'll need more than that now. Maeva tilted her face to his. We'll build it together. He kissed her then slow and deep, the kind that said this was real, that they were not made of broken things, but of roots finding soil again. Inside the shelter, he set down the pine. It's from the high ridge, grows close to the wind. Maeva touched the rough planks. So do we. By mid-September, frost kissed the edges of the low brush, and the hush of early snow hung in the air. The forest had shifted, quieter now, as if listening. Maeva moved differently too, her gait gentler, palm often resting low across her belly as she worked. The cradle board stood finished beside the hearth, waiting. Faelan had begun shaping a new wall for the shelter's south side using the pine he'd brought down from the ridgeline. Each notch and joint was carved by hand, every groove rubbed with bare fat to seal in the warmth. He moved with care, not because he was uncertain, but because he wanted it to last. One evening, as he rinsed his hands in the creek, Maeva sat on a flat stone nearby, sorting through a bundle of dried rose hips. You've built this place stronger than most cabins I've seen, she said, watching the water catch his reflection. It wasn't meant to hold more than one, he answered, wiping his hands on his trousers. But it's changing now. So it needs to hold more. She let the berries fall into her lap, heart slowing with his words. Did you ever think you'd start again? No, he said simply, but I didn't think I'd stop either. I was just waiting for something to shift. And I was the shift. He looked at her then, eyes steady. You were the wind that turned the trees. That night, as wood smoke curled through the rafters, Maeva sat cross-legged beside Faelan, a folded hide between them. She was stitching a pair of small deerskin booties, her needle slipping clean through the soft leather. I want you to name the child, she said, not looking up. He paused over the strip of sinew he was braiding. Why? Because you see things I don't, and I'd rather our child be named by someone who doesn't carry ghosts in their hands. I carry mine too, he said. She finally met his gaze. Then maybe they'll cancel each other out. He gave a small nod, thoughtful. If it's a girl, I would name her Aiyana. It means eternal blossom. Maeva let the name settle in the air like a warm wind. And if it's a boy, Faelan's fingers resumed their work. Tama. Strong-hearted. She repeated both names softly, letting them fit against her tongue. Later, she ran her fingers along the cradle board's smooth curve. You carved a sun into the headrest. I did. Why? Faelan's voice was quiet. Because you are the first light after a long dark. The snow came early that year. By the first week of October, drifts clung to the low rocks and the pond froze in at the edges. Maeva's belly had rounded, and she no longer worked alone outside. Faelan began rising before dawn to gather firewood, returning with his arms full and his beard powdered with frost. One morning, while he was gone, a knock echoed from the edge of the clearing. Maeva stepped outside cautiously, Faelan's rifle in hand. A tall man stood beside a mule, bundled in a buffalo coat, his breath streaming in the cold. "Are you Maeva Nolan?" he asked. She didn't lower the rifle. "Who's asking?" He removed his hat, revealing windburned skin and cautious eyes. "Name's Josiah Cull. I came from Red Elk Crossing." "You've got kin looking for you." Maeva stared at him, her jaw tight. "I have no kin," he shifted. "A woman said she was your aunt, came from Kansas. She's been asking after you for weeks." Maeva lowered the rifle an inch. "Why?" said she heard what happened at the church. She didn't know until after. "She's widowed now, brought a wagon, said you could come back with her, said you deserve better." Maeva stood still, the snow crunching beneath her boots as she stepped closer. "You tell her I found better," he hesitated. "You sure?" "She came a long way." "I'm sure," she said, voice clear. "I'm not going back." Faelan returned before the sun had fully crested the ridge. Josiah was already gone, his mule's tracks fading into the trees. Maeva met Faelan at the edge of the clearing, her arms wrapped around herself. "Someone came," she said. "I saw. She wanted to take me back to Kansas." Faelan didn't ask who, and I told her no. He studied her for a long moment. "I belong here," Maeva said. "With you." "With what we're building." Faelan reached out and touched her cheek, snow melting beneath his palm. "Then we'll keep building." Inside, the fire crackled bright. Maeva sat beside it, her fingers resting lightly on the growing curve of her stomach. Faelan settled beside her, their shoulders touching, and together they watched the snow fall. The first heavy snow came in the night. Maeva woke to the hush of it, the world outside the shelter muffled and pale. Faelan had already risen, and the smell of boiled roots and meat lingered in the air. She found him outside near the new wall, brushing snow from the logs with the edge of his forearm. "You were quiet," she said, pulling his cloak tighter around her shoulders. He didn't look up. "Didn't want to wake you." "You've been sleeping deeper." She stepped closer, her breath clouding between them. "The baby kicks hardest when I'm still, like it knows the world doesn't stop just because I've laid down." Faelan leaned his weight onto the half-finished beam, eyeing the sky. "These clouds won't break for days. Will we have enough to wait it out?" He nodded slowly. "Dry meat's stacked near the back wall. Snow melts clean. There's still willow bark if your pain returns." Maeva looked toward the cradle board, now hanging from a peg beside their bed. "Have you thought about what it might look like?" Faelan wiped his hands on his trousers. "Sometimes, in pieces." "Me too," she said. "I think it'll have your eyes, that steady way of seeing things." He glanced at her, a rare softness in his face. "And your hands. Gentle but never idle." They spent the day inside, the wind pressing against the walls like a restless thing. Faelan carved a small bowl from a chunk of aspen while Maeva spun cord from rabbit sinew, her feet tucked beneath a blanket. The fire snapped and hissed, and the silence between them was easy. As night fell, the wind grew stronger and the shelter creaked at its corners. Maeva set aside her work. "How long did you live here before I came?" "Since I was 17 winters old," he said. "I came after my uncle passed." This ridge was his. She turned toward him. "Did you ever feel lonely?" He didn't answer right away. "There are kinds of loneliness that feel like waiting. I didn't know that until you arrived." Maeva reached for his hand. "I think I was waiting too. I just didn't know what for." He laced their fingers together. The wind rattled again, and Maeva glanced toward the roof. "Will it hold?" Faelan nodded once. "I built it for storms." Before bed, she added another quilt to the cradle board and tucked a strip of rabbit fur inside. Her ankles ached and her breath came slower now when she moved too fast. Faelan helped her into bed without a word. Lying beside him, she whispered, "Do you think the child will understand what this place is?" Faelan's voice was near her ear, low and certain. "They'll know it's made of our hands." In the early hours, a sharp cramp pulled Maeva from sleep. She gritted her teeth and pressed her palm to her belly. It passed, but left behind a dull ache. Faelan stirred beside her. Maeva, I think it's starting. He rose quickly, laying more wood on the fire, then crouched beside her with calm that steadied her pulse. Is it too early? She asked. He shook his head. It's time. The storm outside howled louder, but inside the fire glowed warm and the cradleboard waited. Maeva clutched Faelan's hand as the pain built again. Don't let go. I won't, he said. I'm right here. Hours passed. Snow piled at the doorway and the fire burned low, but Faelan never left her side. When her cries broke through the shelter's walls, they were met not with fear, but with the steady rhythm of a man who had waited too long to lose anything again. And at last, just as the wind began to ease, the child came into the world, slick with life and strong-limbed, lungs full of breath that sounded like a promise. Faelan wrapped the baby in a hide blanket, his hands steady, his eyes wet. Maeva, spent but smiling, reached for them both. Aiyana or Tama? Faelan looked down at the child, then back at her. It's a daughter. She touched the baby's cheek, her heart full. Aiyana. Outside, the storm broke. The first light of dawn slipped through the cracks in the wood and fell across the cradleboard, ready. The snow held through late November, blanketing the ridgeline in silence. Inside the shelter, the world had grown smaller but warmer, a rhythm of feeding, sleeping, and the soft, breathy noises of a newborn learning her way into the world. Aiyana rarely cried, only fussed when the cold touched her skin or hunger stirred. Faelan said it was because she'd been born into stillness, and she carried it with her. Maeva moved slower now, but not from weariness. She moved like a woman who had found a place for every part of herself. Her body ached in unfamiliar ways, but her spirit had steadied. Faelan watched her without words, his hands brushing against her waist when he passed, his eyes catching hers in quiet moments that said more than speech ever could. One morning, as smoke curled upward from the chimney hole, Maeva sat before the hearth with Aiyana tucked against her chest. Her eyes were fixed on the fire, but her mind was far from it. I've been thinking about the spring, she said, her voice low. Faelan glanced up from the strip of sinew he was threading into a new bow. What about it? There's a stone clearing past the pond, good light, flat land. She shifted Aiyana against her shoulder. I want to build a real home there, not just walls and a roof, a place with a table. A place she can grow into. Faelan set the bow down. You want to move from here, Maeva shook her head. I want this place to stay what it's been, a beginning, but I want her to know open windows. I want her to watch the morning sun spill onto floorboards. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I can start shaping planks once the thaw comes. We'll need more nails and hinges. We'll trade for them in town, she said. There was a pause. You'd go back, he asked. Maeva adjusted the wrap around Aiyana's back. Not to stay. But I'm not frightened of being seen anymore. Faelan nodded once. Then we'll go together. When the first melt came, Faelan hitched their pack mule and loaded the sledge with smoked meat, tanned hides, and a bundle of herbs Maeva had dried through the winter. Aiyana rode against her mother's chest, wrapped in a thick wool shawl. Her eyes blinked open to the sun, then closed again without fuss. Red Elk Crossing hadn't changed much. The church steeple still leaned slightly to the east, and the blacksmith shop clanged steady as ever. But this time, when Maeva stepped down from the sledge, heads turned for a different reason: her calm, her strength, the child in her arms, and the man at her side. Inside the mercantile, the storekeeper didn't ask where she'd been. He only nodded, wordless, and set out what she asked for: nails, hinges, a saw with a good steel edge. Faelan bartered with 2 cured pelts and a bundle of dried trout. No one questioned the trade. As they packed the supplies, a voice called from the edge of the porch. I heard you'd come back. Maeva turned. A gray-haired woman stood just beyond the hitching post, her shawl tugged tight against her shoulders. She looked like road dust and worn grief. Maeva knew her instantly. Aunt Corinne. The woman stepped forward slowly. I didn't come to take you. I came to see if you were still breathing. I am, Maeva said. Better than I ever was. Corinne looked down at Aiyana, then back at Faelan. And this is your family? Maeva nodded, her voice steady. It is. Kareen's gaze lingered a moment longer, then she reached into her satchel and pulled out a small wooden pendant. "This belonged to your mother. I kept it too long." Maeva took it, the weight of it unfamiliar but not unwelcome. "Thank you." Kareen didn't linger. She turned without another word, her boots crunching down the road. That night back at the shelter, Faelan laid the new tools beside the hearth. Maeva held the pendant in her hand, Aiyana asleep in her lap. "You're quiet," he said. She looked tired. Like someone who'd waited too long to let go. Faelan ran his fingers through Maeva's hair. "You let go sooner." "I had something to reach for." By early May, the ground had dried enough to begin. They cleared the stone patch near the pond, dug shallow foundation lines, and propped up the first beams. Aiyana lay swaddled in a sling while Maeva carried water and sanded old planks smooth. The work was slow, but steady. Faelan built the door frame first, saying a home needed a way in before anything else. Maeva planted chokecherry near the window, saying a home needed sweetness too. As the days lengthened, so did the walls. One by one, the pieces came together. Rafters, floorboards, a wide sill beneath the east window where Maeva could set her herbs to dry. In late June, they raised the roof beam together, Faelan lifting while Maeva held it steady with a brace beneath. The sky above them was wide and blue, and the forest edge shimmered with new green. When the house stood finished, plain but strong, Maeva stepped inside and breathed deep. The scent of pine and newly packed earth filled her lungs. Aiyana cooed against her shoulder. Faelan stood behind her, his hand lightly resting at her waist. "You built this," he said. She turned to face him. "We did." He leaned down, brushing his lips against hers. "I never thought I'd have it again. A home, a family. You have both," she whispered. "And I'm not going anywhere." They slept on the floor that first night, wrapped in blankets, the fire crackling low in the stone hearth. Aiyana lay between them, her tiny hands splayed open in sleep. Maeva reached for Faelan's hand, their fingers curling together. "You know," she said softly, "when I first sat down by that creek, I thought my life was over." Faelan kissed the inside of her wrist. It hadn't even begun yet. The moonlight spilled through the open window, casting the cradle board's curve in silver. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a lullaby, and inside, wrapped in warmth and wood smoke, they slept as a family whole, unbroken and home.